this national education policy is in discussion right from 2015. I hope you remember in the new government, the education minister, Madam Irani was there, and simultaneously this policy was discussed in a wide forums. And it is, I realize that as an education administrator and observer, it's very difficult to write a national policy on education to suit everybody. It's very important, very difficult. But what I see as a school administrator in a different angle, there are different angles for this national education policy. Primarily, there is a political angle, then historical angle, spiritual angle, social angle, child rights angle. There are different angles. People define this and they speak about this policy, the advantages and disadvantages. And some people find it very threatening. Some people find it, the policy, as more flexible. I, as a person involved in running a school, I keep everything out. I look at the policy in the child rights and child education principles. If you look at this policy was introduced, though I have said in 2015, 16 and all that, it was introduced in 2019 as it gained rapid appreciation as well as intense criticism from various quarters. Soon the proposal to make everybody thinks the Hindi language as one of the indispensable language, which was rejected by many few states, and more so in Tamil Nadu. I will not look into that aspect. Then the draft was put into public domain and suggestions were invited from people and all stakeholders regarding policy. The Ministry of Human Resource Development has received millions of suggestions and the draft NEP has been amended accordingly. I don't know how many teachers or how many school owners or including the government teachers have given their suggestions to prepare this national education policy draft. The MHRD received millions of suggestions, and based on that, they made, I don't know what was in their mind, but they say that it was all these suggestions were included wherever possible. The new education policy, the cabinet chaired by the Prime Minister approved this policy on 29th July 2020. The policy has replaced 34-year-old National Policy on Education 1996. Let us have a look at some key points of the National Education Policy, then we will go deep into it. The National Education Policy was approved by the Union Cabinet, as I said, on July 20th, 2020, to bring about what I call, or everybody calls it, as transformational reforms in school and higher education system in the country. This is a much needed factor in our education system in this country. This is the first education policy for this 21st century, which replaces, as I said earlier, 34-year-old National Policy on Education 1986. Also, the Ministry of Human Resource is also renamed as Ministry of Education. What does it mean? I mean, human resource is one, and Ministry of Education. That shows that we are going to deal with, through this policy, in education. But there are other than the education, there are other resources, human resources you have developed. But if I look at closely the National Education Policy, education should include all that is required for the development of human resource. Instead of calling it as human resource and add education into it, now it has been done. That's what I interpret. I don't know what the policy formulators have done, but what I think that this is changed as a different angle. Instead of calling it as a human resource department, they call it education department, which should include all the angles. I mean, if there is another opportunity, we will discuss what are the angles which the education should have. And as educators, we already know what do you mean by education. The other thing which is very interesting for me is the government launched several initiatives in the education sector, such as the Academic Bank of Credit. This will provide multiple entry and exit options for students in higher education, because we have to prepare also the children in the school education to move to higher education, where they don't need to stay there for 4 years, 5 years, or 6, 7 years. They can enter and exit, and they can do something. This is one of the best option available for our students. The other things which I have noticed, the 1986 national policy was framed and modified in 1992. Between 1986 and 1992, various changes have happened. And in 1992, we call that as Program of Action. And the education policy was modified. Various changes during this period have taken place in the country, including our economy and the world at large. Therefore, it is necessary to change or gear up the education sector as per the demands of 21st century needs of the people and the country. I know when I always say one side is the negative side of Corona, but the positive side of Corona is I thank Corona for accelerating the technology transformation in the school education, in education in general and school education in particular. Otherwise, the technology might have gone very far, and it would be difficult for the educators to chase and transform themselves as a technology schools, incorporated schools. The process of formulating a new education policy by the government got initiated, as I mentioned earlier, via various consultation process for an inclusive, participatory, and holistic approach. After an unprecedented formulation of the consultation, New Education Policy 20 has been formulated, and it involved around, I don't have proper record from the government sector, but this I have collected it somewhere. 2 lakh suggestions from 2.5 lakh Gram Panchayat, 6,600 blocks, 676 districts from the country. From January 2015, the ministry, at that time, the Ministry of MHRD initiated an unprecedented, collaborative, inclusive, and participatory consultation process. And the critics of national education policy now, I don't know how many of them have contributed to this collection of suggestions. Committee for evolution of the new education policy under the chairmanship of late Sri T.S.R. Subramaniam, former cabinet secretary, submitted its report in 2016. Some inputs for the draft national policy are prepared by the ministry, which is based on this report. Further, 2017, a committee for the draft national education policy was constituted under the chairmanship of eminent scientist Dr. K. Kasturirangan. And on May 2019, the draft educational policy was submitted to the Honorable Human Resource Development Minister, and it was uploaded in MHRD's website and My Government Innovate portal for suggestions, comments of stakeholders, including public. Why I'm giving this historical information to you is that all of us must understand, after something is brought in, we should not make a hue cry and try and solve what are all the problems within the national education policy. But personally, I feel from 2015 onwards, ample opportunities were given to the public, general public, the educators, the school owners, the government sector, human resource development people to comment, to give their suggestions so that a comprehensive national education policy can be written. But now the policy has come and it is implemented. So what we should do is find out wherever there is a difficulty, we can only express instead of completely rejecting or completely, saying that this will not work. That's not possible. That's not fair. So if people say that the policy cannot work, they should have referred their contribution to the Education Formulation Committee, what they have given and how it was not included. So this is very, very important for me, because there are a lot of critics which are worth considering at this stage. The aim of the policy is to universalization of education from preschool to secondary level with 100% GER, gross enrollment ratio in school education by 2030. We are now we are in the 75th, completed 75 years after independence. Still, we are not able to include everybody. We are not able to bring in everybody in the education sector. Still, more than 2 crores of children out of the school sector. I mean, this is something very alarming. I think we must, all of us must work together to bring in all these children who are outside the school system. This is the target is by 2030. SDG, the Millennium Development Goals, also completes at that time. So our target is very, very sharp. We must move forward to get this done. Through the open schooling system, this 2 crore out of school children will come into the mainstream. This is what the plan. Then the 10+2 system in the schools is replaced by 5+3+3+4 curricular structure corresponding to age. I keep saying, this is what I interpret. Instead of saying first standard, second standard, third standard, fourth standard, children don't grow like this. You give them 225 days, 230 days in a year, and you give them some learning outcomes. And based on the learning outcomes, you assess the child. If the child has not acquired all the competencies, you give them marks and you retain them if the child doesn't move to certain level. But I think I take this national policy, this system, as age-appropriate competencies children should get. 5+3+3+4. This system, though in the policy it talks about pre-KG, LKG, UKG, first standard, second standard, like that. But what I like in this is this age. 3 to 8, 8 to 11, 11 to 14, and 14 to 18 respectively. This is something very nice, because children growth and development doesn't happen the way in which we teach in the schools. The children's growth and development takes its own pace according to the experience, according to various other factors of the child. So let us not push the children to acquire these competencies, for example, LKG or UKG or first standard or second standard. And we fail this thing, because all these years, the policy was based on the content. So rote learning was promoted. So marking system was given. Competencies, skills, and abilities were not given priority. So now, if you look at the child, what should happen to the child at the age of 3 or 2.5 when the child comes to Anganwadi? What type of a developmental milestone the children should have acquired at that age? This is very important. In my school, what I am doing is I also get the child development workers plus the medical people, especially the gynecologists, to help the teachers to understand how the fetus is growing inside the womb of a mother, and prenatal, perinatal, then postnatal, how the child is being looked after. The developments are looked after is very, very important. When the child reaches Anganwadi, or in our case to LKG at the age of 3, if the developmental milestones from the birth or even during the womb did not happen, then we will have problems. We have to do something to simulate this growth so that the child becomes normal. So this 5 years, the entry point of the 5 years, where even the policy says only foundational literacy and numeracy skills. I go beyond that. It's not only literacy and numeracy skills, but much more than that. Their mental health, their physical health, all that has to be taken care of, and a monitoring system should be implemented. And that those monitoring systems should be discussed with the parents of these children, because approximately 65% or little more than 65% of the learning of a person is over by the time that person reaches 80 years. Then it is very important. In many schools, I have noticed that this LKG, UKG, first standard, second standard teachers are low paid, and they are low talented. They are not that much qualified and experienced, skilled to help children to attain these milestones until the age of 18. In India, we have more than 9.7 million teachers. And out of that, even if you divide that into 12, at least 1 million teachers will be in the first group, LKG till second standard. These teachers are to be trained. I also request the listeners, the educators, to read the UNICEF report, which was published last month on the status of education in India, where they spoke much about the teachers. So in the new education policy, now if we implement, the first priority for us is to train all the teachers based on this. Sadly, not many teachers read the national education policy, and including the heads of the schools also. They don't give priority to the national education policy. If that is not being done, then again, we will go back to the primary level of what we are now, and that we will not be able to call ourselves as a knowledge power in the world. So then under the school curriculum, the new system will bring, as I told you, the uncovered age of 3 to 6 years. This is very important. This age that has been recognized globally as the critical stage for the development of the mental faculties of the child. As per the new policy, there will be 12 years of schooling with 3 years of Anganwadi and preschooling. The new policy emphasizes foundational literacy and numeracy. As I said, we must go beyond this literacy and numeracy, because then this will happen in our preschools again. Baba, black sheep, rain, rain, go away, things like that would happen. And speaking in English is very good, but that is not the that's not the education. There will be there should not be any rigid separation between academic streams, extracurricular, vocational streams in schools. It should not be separated. There should not be a separation. When I say this, there should be integrated. How the academic streams and extracurricular activities can come. So new curriculum framework has to be framed, and that curriculum framework should be implementable. I mean, when I think they are writing now the National Curriculum Framework 2021, I was expecting that probably this will be National Curriculum Framework 2022. In that, the curriculum writers should also help how this could be implemented. So the teaching up to the grade 5, now it says it will be in the mother tongue. The question is how these English medium schools will take it up. These are the issues to be sorted out by the individual schools, by the individual states, how they are going to do this. And another important thing is, very important for us, is the assessment reforms which the policy has brought in. The policy says it is 360 degrees and for achieving learning outcomes, progress of the students. And the learning outcomes should not be only the cognitive development of the child. This 360 degree is cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domains. These three are included into this. The curriculum framework should also include the learning outcomes, should include every learning outcome should, if possible, include this cognitive, affective, and the psychomotor domain. This is going to come. The other opportunity, as I told you, 9.7 million teachers are in India, and more women in the city side and more men in the rural side. And this also has its implications for the learners, and that we will discuss later. But the policy says that all these teachers are to be empowered. How these people have to be empowered? So the NCTE, in consultation with the NCERT, will reformulate a new and comprehensive national curriculum framework for teacher education. The minimum degree of qualification for teaching will be 4 years, integrated BE by 2030. So now already we have to do, and if any teachers are listening to this webinar, my humble request is please upgrade yourself, because I always call our children are digital natives, and we are all immigrants to the natives' land. So our children are far, far ahead of in the digital world, and we have to transform ourselves. And definitely we are immigrants, whether we like it or not, and the natives are our children. So upgradation is very, very important. And when the children move, now the policy has a higher level of target to have this 50% enrollment in the higher education, and to reach that, around 3.5 crores or 4 crores seats are to be increased in the higher education. And the higher education curriculum also possesses a flexibility of subjects. Various entry, exit to be will be allowed with relevant certification. If you want to go for 1 year course in a university, and you can do that and come back and do something. This is something very, very dear to me. I mean, this is how most of the countries also follow it, and you don't need to stay there for 3 complete years. Come and do something very practically, and then you go back. This helps people not only to learn and also to ease their economical difficulties if they have anything. And to do this, to facilitate this, the transfer of credits to the academic bank of credits will be established. The next one is fostering strong research culture and building research capacity across higher education. National Research Foundation is created. This is going to be there. National education policy, if you read in between lines, you will understand that research skills have to be being started from the class 1. The teachers have to help children to do this. This is exactly what they call it vocational. This is vocational education in the national education policy. When it says vocational education, it's misunderstood by people. It's not for the vocation. It is for learning a skill. If you want to learn a skill, you have to do some practices, project-based and experience-based learning. Nothing wrong in learning a vocation. You read the theoretical part of it, and unless you apply that and see whether the theory is okay or not, you will not know. Then you will have to only reproduce what you have memorized. That's why it is saying, I would not like to call this as a vocational education. I will call it as an experiential learning. Do that project-based learning, project-based teaching, project-based assessment is going to help. To do that, what is a project? When you do a project, try and give a vocation. But interestingly, I would also like to remind our people that there was a study done by Dell and IBM, I think, by 2030, 65% of the jobs that are prevailing now will not be there. Then what are we going to do? And what the policy says? The policy also says that's why the flexibility. You come out, you go in. You enter, you exit, and try and find out what type of skills you have to acquire. If 65% of the jobs are going to be, disappear, then what are the new things? Unfortunately, these new jobs are not yet invented. So new jobs are going to come. Many jobs are going to come in. So the future is very uncertain. The present changes, it's very clear. We know the present changes. We are going as per this. But what is happening? What is happening? How we are going to help our children to an uncertain future? This is very important, which we have to do. We have to understand. So in 15 years, the affiliation, I mean, there are a lot of things are going to happen in the university and the higher education system. Then I would not go deep into it because I stay with only the school education. The NEP 20 is emphasizing setting up of gender inclusion fund, special education zones for disadvantaged regions and groups. I think the government sector, the government education sector should look into it and use these funds and these opportunities very carefully so that we can reach the targets stipulated by not only by our country, but also by the SDG, developmental goals. Then the funds in the national education policy, it says that increase the public investment in the education sector to reach 6% of GDP at the earliest for this. And I wish the government come forward and spend completely this 6%. I mean, not yet we have, though the target is fixed as 6% GDP, we have not yet reached that level. I think now it is needed. The ambitious plans by the national education policy has to be achieved. Then the 6% GDP is a must, if not more. In both schools and higher education, NEP will promote multilingualism. This is a very touchy subject for many people. The policy also says the institutes for Pali, Persian, Sanskrit, Parkit, all these institutions will be set up. I leave that there because this is also a very touchy thing. Let us see how this is going to work over a period. There are important points in the new educational policy, hoping that the policy will boost employment. That's very, very important in the country and will radically transform our educational system. As I mentioned earlier, children in the first 3 years will receive preschool education. In Anganwadi, still it is not clear for many people. Anganwadis are scattered all over the place in village and rural areas, but how these Anganwadis can be brought into the school sector is to be formulated by the individual states and individual districts, individual taluks, how these Anganwadis can be brought into the regular school sector. Then the preparatory stage, that is 8 to 11 years, where the children will be taught science, mathematics, arts, etc. We have been trying for the last few years, many years, I would say, increasing the scientific temper among the school children, but this has to be popularized. And 8 to 11 years, the children where they try to understand how and what is working and what's not working. The scientific temper, the education in science and mathematics should be given importance. If you look at the science, for example, the physics and mathematics, has the lot of things are similar, but the teachers have to come. The other interesting thing which I noticed in the national education policy is interdisciplinary and integrated. Not only extracurricular and sports and the games are separate, should not be separated. Similarly, the subjects should also be should not be separated. These departments were started mainly for the particular subjects branch of knowledge to grow. But unfortunately, in educational institutions, the department has become compartments. I mean, that should be changed, and the departments should come as departments, but interdisciplinary, integrated approach in teaching learning has to happen. Then the middle stage is class 6 to 8. Children aged between 11 and 14 will be covered by the subject-based classes. Here we start the skills development courses in the 6th grade itself. So that will give an acceleration so that children will acquire skills and competencies. Remember, the rote learning is giving its way. That will disappear. Now everybody has to do hands-on experience, and they have to acquire competencies and skills. Whether, and we must, the teachers must also look into it. The assessment is 360-degree. The 360-degree is, as I mentioned earlier, it is cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domain. Not only that, the different styles of learning among children should also be taken into consideration. The auditory learner, the visual learner, the kinesthetic learner, the numeric learner, all of them should also be taken care of by the teachers. There is a big challenge for the teachers in the classrooms, and that has to be understood by all us. Let us not wait for the government to come us give us a rule, and we ourselves and educators, we know the children in front of us, they are not unique. They have their learning style is different, their intelligences are different, their levels are different. So it is very, very important. And those teachers who have learned, who have done B.Ed, you might have learned this Bloom's taxonomy. Now it has gone. Krathwell and his friend brought another taxonomy. Now digital taxonomy has come in. So it is very, very important for us, for all the educators, to quickly move into it. Then we will be able to make our children, or make this country as a global knowledge society. It's possible only there. So we come to the secondary stage. From 9th to 12th standard will be studied in 2 phases, where intensive study of the subjects will be conducted. There will also be freedom to choose subject. This is another opportunity for this. I request the school authorities and teachers and others to understand all these, and it's already started in schools like us. In our school, we have started. Meanwhile, this pandemic has come and caused the method of teaching, the approach in teaching, learning, assessment process, the technology enabled schools. Now virtual schools are coming, the home schools are coming, the hybrid learning is coming. So all these things are to be taken into consideration. For this to understand very clearly, I request each one of the educators to read this, read the National Education Policy very thoroughly, so that we will be ready, we will understand what is what. Let us not pull and push within our school system or within our higher education system to what is that and all that. Let us not put our own ideas. Where you can put your own idea is take the principles, the aims, the objectives, the vision of the education policy. To implement this, you put your ideas. That is going to work. This is, anyway, this is our final webinar. Here I would like to emphasize all that which you want to do in the classroom, or all that you want to do for the school. It is important that it should be based on the National Education Policy and the principles, aims and objectives and the visions of the education policy. This is what they have written. Dr. Kasturi Rangan said that vocational education, which grants professional knowledge from the 6th class onwards. I mean, there is a misrepresentation or misquote when we call it vocational education. I mean, we call this vocational education related to a work. It is, but I don't know, the English is, I'm not very good in English, but I don't think that it is a vocational education. It is a project-based education where the professional knowledge of the learner is improved. It's not to do a vocation, but it is to understand a concept and the principles of what we learn. This is very important, and that is what it is. And the other things are internships and other things will be given. Emphasis will be placed on the project-based learning and project-based assessment and all that. So I presume that if all of us, everybody in the education sector, 9.7 million teachers, we are all working in 1.5 million schools in India. If all of us read and put our thoughts into the National Education Policy, the principles begin. There are certain things which are not possible for us to implement. Find a replacement for it instead of throwing it away. And we have to do, because this is written in such a way, in an orderly way, so that we have to read these things and implement it. And with this, I would like to conclude my presentation to you. And I thank every one of you. And maybe you can also contact me if you want anything, or contact Pandudas. And I would like to finally say, Pandudas is also trying to bring in a lot of things into this. Now they are into coding from 6th standard onwards. And Pandudas, in our school, we are using Pandudas story books, the visual one. This is very, very important. We had an exclusive training for our teachers last week. Children, especially the 5+3+3, the first batch 5, they are mostly visual learners. They would like to see by themselves to learn. They are not going to write. I mean, in any language skills, listening, speaking, reading, and writing is important, and they have to listen and see what is happening. And Pandudas program, the software is very interesting. And after last week's training, we have been using it for the last 1 year, but they are updating it regularly, and that training was very useful. And especially, I also recommend to all the school leaders and also the teachers who are in the beginning stage, the children from 3 to 8, to use the Pandudas program, which is very, very important language. It's also available in 8 Indian languages. That's where they have pre-thought about it. Multilingualism is there. I was saying in 2-3 webinars ago that I improved my Kannada because of Pandudas things. I listened this in English and my mother tongue Tamil. Then I also listen it in Kannada. It's very, very good, and I'm improving multilingualism, and I'm going to use it for Telugu. And Hindi, I know a little bit, but still I will use Pandudas program. I request the educators, especially the teachers, to look into this software, this program, which is very, very useful. Thank you, Nirmala Madam, Ms. Krishnan Sir, and also Lucy Ma'am for this opportunity to me to share my ideas. I don't know whether I have exceeded my time. If I have exceeded my, please excuse me. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. God bless all of us.